This morning in the Sunday Spotlight, the Arizona State Legislative Session winding down. Now, while the state budget has passed with bipartisan support, the number of vetoes by Governor Katie Hobbs is adding up and breaking records. Republicans narrowly control the legislature while a Democrat is in the governor's office. And that divided government we've seen is not going anywhere. As lawmakers look to wrap up this session, attention is already moving toward the next session in trying to get things done. I look at that job ahead with Tucson's Democratic representative and chair of the bipartisan caucus, Alma Hernandez, and Republican representative and Speaker of the House, Ben Toma. We start this morning with Representative Hernandez. While her party is and has been in the minority, she says it does not stop her at all from reaching across the aisle.
For me, it's really important that we always find some sort of compromise and way of working together. As mentioned, I've been serving now for the last 5 years. Our current speaker, Speaker Ben Toma, is someone who I started, when I first got elected, I started working with him very early on. I will say that things are obviously very different because it's so divided in the sense that there are only 31 Republicans, 29 Democrats, and you need 31 to pass a bill. So things have been a little more partisan this time, unfortunately. Even for example, myself, I usually get bills across the finish line. I'm one of very few Democrats that has had a bill signed by a Republican. And now, I had a really hard time this session getting any of my legislation forward. So I will say that it is difficult. I'm not going to lie and pretend that it's not a difficult situation to be in.
You've been there for 5 years, as you said. Have you ever seen it this divided in the state legislature?
Honestly, no. And it's, again, goes back to the point that I was making earlier, which is we have a Democratic governor now. And I believe that we have been in a situation where the Republicans have operated as if they were in a supermajority, and they are not. And I think that's one of the things that I like to remind my colleagues, especially those that I work really well with, is, hey guys, look, I understand you guys are still in the majority, but you are only in the majority by one member. So we have to start finding ways to actually work together. Out of the hundreds of bills that were introduced this session, only 31 Democratic bills made it out of committees. 31. And I'm talking about hundreds. I mean, I believe this session we had over 600 that were introduced, and only 31 Democratic bills made it into committee.
And this divided government isn't going anywhere. You know that. You've got wrapping up this session, looking at next session. Is there anything you have learned in this session that could help move things along next time around?
Yeah, I will say that one of the things that I've learned, we have a lot of new members, but on both sides. I believe it's 2/3 of our legislature has flipped. It's all new members. I have learned that sometimes you will find your alliances and your people that will champion and work with you all the way, even if they're people you usually don't work with. And I have figured that out this session even more now, that finding those alliances and building those coalitions with people that necessarily I wouldn't always work with can go a long way.
One thing that we haven't seen before ever is the number of vetoes by a governor, almost 100. By the time we end the session, it could very well be over 100. I know you haven't been a fan of a couple of those vetoes, but where are you? What kind of message do you think those vetoes send?
Yeah, so I'll start off by saying, it's been a very long time since we've had a Democratic governor. I have been a big supporter, and I'm grateful to have that. So for me, seeing there are a lot of vetoes that I do believe are rightfully vetoed. Like, those are something that as a Democrat, I could not stand and support. And I'm just glad that we have somewhere that can veto them, especially when we're attacking people for who they are or just attacking voter rights, things of that nature that I don't believe are my core values, that we should be, upset because it's a veto. I'm glad that those are being vetoed. However, as you mentioned, there are some vetoes that have happened that I didn't necessarily agree with. And I think that we're at a point in time where we're going to have to move forward. I'm willing to do that. I'm willing to say, okay, we didn't get it done this time, but what can we do to get it done next session? How
optimistic are you? You said that things have not been as divided as they are now. At the same time, you said you know how to work together. How optimistic are you that you as a representative who's written a lot of bills, who's pushed a lot of bills, who's sponsored a lot of bills, can get those bills over the finish line?
Yeah, so it's going to be an interesting session because, as you know, it's election season. Election season means things get very difficult for everyone. So I will say that on my end, I will continue to do everything possible to work with Speaker Toma and work with my Republican colleagues to ensure that we can actually find solutions.
Hernandez goes on to tell me election year politics are much different at the state capitol and will take more work to get big policy done. Now to the House Speaker Ben Toma. While he says a divided government is healthy and adds a layer of checks and balances, he adds it means it is more important work to do inside when it comes to compromise and getting things done.
When we have a divided government like this, each branch is designed to be a check on the other, and that is very much what has happened over the last 100 or so days since we started the session.
The number of vetoes by the governor, record-breaking, pushing 100, I believe, is the latest number this morning. What is your response to that?
Well, I think it's a little bit unfortunate, to be perfectly blunt with you on that. It just shows well, in my opinion, it shows that there is a little bit of a lack of direction from the ninth floor, perhaps, on some of these issues. And there's always an opportunity through the process of the legislature to engage and to try to influence the final product in some way. So that really hasn't been happening much, which is why I think you're seeing so many vetoes. But bottom line is, especially as I said before, in this divided government situation, we have to work together, whether we like it or not. We have to work together in order to get a product that both sides can accept, and that really hasn't been happening as much as it perhaps should earlier on in the process. Having said that, there is good news, as you no doubt know. We've managed to get a budget that was really bipartisan and was overwhelming support from both sides. So there is an opportunity for us to trumpet some of those wins as well.
You talked about working together. Have you, as the speaker, have had any one-on-one meetings with the ninth floor about how to navigate this, how to work together moving forward?
Well, we have, and the budget was a direct result of that. In terms of the actual substantive negotiations on the budget, it was really myself, the Senate President, and the governor herself, and a couple of our key staffers that sat through and ironed out every one of those line items. And it sounds like it's an easy thing. It's very not. It's hundreds and hundreds of line items that we go through and we negotiate and try to get to a final product. In terms of other issues, there are some opportunities, I think, for us to improve that communication and to build on that and find ways to get there on some other issues that are still outstanding before we wrap up the session.
A lot of these vetoes from the governor are election-related bills, of course, brought up by Republicans and then vetoed by the Democratic governor. A lot of these spring from 2020 and election questions there, Arizona center stage of all that, of course. Looking ahead to 2024, assuming none of these election bills get through to the governor's desk for signature, how secure do you think the elections will be in 24 in Arizona?
Well, so I still have hope that we do have another session before that election comes to pass. There is an opportunity for us to continue working on some of these issues. I did have one that I have been working on, and we've been working on with Democrats, actually having to do with ballot images and having them available for the general public as well. And I get that election integrity is kind of a lightning rod issue, is very divisive as a subject. But I still hope that cooler heads will prevail in the end, and that where it makes sense for us to make changes, that we're going to make changes.
How optimistic are you that, like you say, cooler heads will prevail and more things could actually get done this session and into next?
I think the governor will settle in a bit before the next session. In particular, we'll have some time, perhaps, to figure some of the process out and figure out ways that we can work together in a more meaningful way, again, earlier in the process.
And this from the governor's office on working in a divided government and moving forward. Quote, Governor Katie Hobbs, along with every single legislator, whether they're Democrat, Republican, or independent, receive the same mandate from their constituents. The people they serve want them to address the state's most pressing issues, which is why she won't sign into law any legislation that doesn't do just that. It continues, quote, with the signing of the budget bill earlier this month, Governor Hobbs believes compromise can be reached across the aisle. Both sides tell me they have learned from this session and are willing to change some aspects of what they do to get more done in the next session. We'll watch it and let you know if it happens. That's it for this week's Sunday Spotlight. I'm Andrew Capasso. Join me again here next Sunday morning at 6. 13 News Live this morning with Sabria continues after a quick break.